Good day, everyone. NSS NIT Trichy welcomes you all to yet another episode of Socio-Talks. People living with autism, the fastest growing developmental disability in the world, experience greater stress than those living with any other disability due to lack of social reciprocity. To provide support and services to people with autism and their families, and to create an environment in India in which people with autism spectrum disorder (ASD) are able to grow to their full potential, the Action of Autism was started in 1991. From day one, they are instrumental in conducting awareness campaigns, research on autism cure, and collaborative training programs to ensure the upliftment of autistic people. Today, as a part of a Socio-Talk series conducted by NSS NIT Trichy, we have with us Mary Barua, Director of National Center of Autism, India, a well-renowned social activist and a consultant. We shall hear from her about the Action of Autism program and the National Center of Autism. Welcome, ma'am. Ma'am, autism is shown by many famous personalities. But before they become famous, they go through a lot of limitations. Though they have a lot of strengths and skills towards a particular thing, it is very difficult for them to identify their special interest. So, can you please share with us how challenging it is for them to find a special interest? Something in which they are very good at, something in which they can focus and develop it. So how difficult is it to help them to find a special interest?
Okay, so this is a slightly complicated question that you asked, because when you're talking about famous personalities with autism, you are not talking about the average person, right? So it's not that most of those who are really famous, they usually did not have a great deal of difficulty in their skills were very evident. And to give you an example, for most of us who are average people, all of us, we are everyday regular people. We don't really always have a special skill. Most of us just go and take up a job, and if we are slightly interested in something, we go and do that. So when we are talking about very famous people with autism, like say Dr. Temple Grandin, she enjoyed being around animals because she felt that she understood them the way she understood herself, and she was interested in psychology, and the whole thing got her interested in being in that area. Or when you think about people like, say, Dr. Stephen Shaw, who enjoys teaching, and he basically teaches about neurodiversity. So when you're talking about identifying their special skills, I would say that most of them, just like most of us neurotypical people, do not have a special skill, right? They are regular skills like all of us. Instead, I would say there are certain pitfalls that we have to keep in mind. A common one is, of course, that, a lot of people with autism, they sing, right? Now, and one of the challenges that happens is if they sing, we think that they should have a career in music. Now, a lot of us sing, but we will not necessarily have a career in music unless we're really, really, really good at it, right? So we should not get into that pitfall that just because somebody's singing, that should be the career for them, right? That's one. Number two, there is the other pitfall where it is presumed that most people with autism would be great at IT. Just because they're good on computers, they go online and they look at YouTube. But that's something that the entire current generation of people do. It is not particularly for people with autism, right? Of course, there are people with autism who are absolute whizzes at in IT, in the IT sector, but so are a lot of non-autistic people as well. I think, having said that, for most of them who are regular, average people with autism, any area of work based on their ability, education, etc., any area where there is a certain level of predictability, where there is not a great deal of social interaction required, are areas where they will do well. So, for instance, you have people with autism who are good psychologists, right? Where they're usually doing one on one counseling or they're giving lectures. They can be good professors because they're giving lectures. They are not having to socially interact in a large group in unpredictable situations. So, those are really the things that one has to keep in mind, that they are good in a range of things, but you have to find, if you say that a person with autism would be, autistic people would be great receptionists at a hotel, there would be a minimal number of people who can handle that. Most autistic people would have a huge challenge in being working in the reception in a hotel, where there is constant social interaction that's constantly changing. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that we should not get into the little pitfall that these are the areas that they're good at, those are the areas they're not good at. They are good at things just like everybody else. They're not very good at many other things like most of us. Basically, they need jobs that will exploit their potential. And it does not always have to be with very high skills in one area, just like neurotypical people.
Very well said, ma'am. So moving on to the next question. Autism is also termed as a social communication disorder. So how can autistic people be made socially inclusive?
Okay. So the most important part of autism is the social communication. That is different. The way they understand the social milieu is very different from neurotypical people. Their social understanding is very different from those of us who are not autistic. And I think the way to make the milieu accommodate people with autism is in trying to understand them, understand the challenges that they face in the social interactions. For instance, their difficulties with irony, with sarcasm. They have difficulties with these things, right? They have difficulty in sometimes processing information that comes very fast. And their understanding of the social, they will have difficulty sometimes in figuring out the context in which something is being said, and which is what helps us to know what a person means. So, for instance, a class teacher who says in class that tells a student, "Yes, that is wonderful. Sit there and keep playing with your video game. There's no need for you to do your work." In the context of the classroom where work has to be done, the non-autistic kid will understand that the teacher actually wants me to finish my work, right? Whereas the autistic person would probably think that I am getting permission to continue doing what I'm doing. So it is context that helps us understand how to behave in particular situations. So, for instance, if I know that, I'm not very good in social situations, right? But when I go to somebody's house, I know I can talk about the weather. It's an easy thing to talk about. Say, it's so lovely, now winter, summer is coming in Delhi, but winter is still there a little bit. It's still cool. It's so pleasant. I know that I can talk about these things. And we often teach autistic people that, talk about the weather. That's an easy thing to talk about. Someone who is critically and terminally ill in the hospital, given the context of the situation, the lovely weather is not something that I will start the conversation with, right? Because we know how to refer to the context and know what to say and what not to say. Those are the things that make things difficult for people with autism. And if you're working with people, autistic people, you know that. If you're working with autistic people, you know that sudden changes, transitions are challenging for them. And you have to make the accommodations for that. The difficulty that happens is that autism is a condition that doesn't have a physiological marker. You cannot look at a person and say, oh, this person is blind, or this person has Down syndrome, or this person has cerebral palsy. You cannot say that. And hence the expectation from people with autism is that they should act normal. Hence this whole thing about cure. There is no cure for autism, right? But this whole business of cure. In fact, there is a multi-million-dollar business that carries on with professionals trying to make money, saying that I'll cure people with autism is a load of rubbish, right? But it succeeds because there is no physiological marker, and therefore it is easy to hoodwink parents and tell them, I can cure your child. So the way to make the environment inclusive for them and for them to be able to function in the environment is for us to change our attitude, to change our mindsets, and make accommodations for them exactly the way we would do for other people with disabilities. Answers your question.
Great, ma'am. So, yes, ma'am. Okay, moving on to the next question, ma'am. So, can you please share some services that the National Center for Autism offers for autistic people?
Right. Okay. So the National Center, the organization is more widely known as Action for Autism, and we provide lifespan services. So right from early identification and diagnosis to early intervention, we run a special needs school, but we also support students in inclusive education. We do a lot of work with parents. We run parent empowerment, parent training, and parent empowerment programs. In addition, we work in employment, so we run a sheltered workplace, but we also place people with autism in employment outside. And in addition, we do a lot of advocacy work like helping to change the laws, helping to change policies, impacting policies. In addition, there is a certain amount of research work that we do, and we are a training organization. So we run B.Ed and diploma courses. Plus, through the year, we run a lot of short training courses on various aspects of autism. We also do tailored trainings for specific organizations. And finally, I think the one other thing that we do is we run what is called assisted living for adults with autism, because there will be many adults who will have a challenge living completely on their own when the parents are no longer there. So we have an assisted living for individuals like that. And of course, we've done a lot of awareness work in the area of autism. So all of these things happen at the National Center.
Wow, ma'am, that's a lot of things. It really shows that you care so much for autism, and it shows the amount of input you are putting in for the society.
Well, we started anything on autism, and 30 years back, there was very little internationally also on autism. So there was very little. So one had to step in and try and, do whatever was required.
Yes, ma'am. So true. So, ma'am, moving on to the next question. So, how can a person be a part of the NCA?
See, there are multiple ways. Parents can always become a member, and see, when you become a member, or even when you become a part of it, I think the most important thing is to try and we have a very rights-based approach, which is something that is not still that well understood in the country. People do use a lot of politically correct language, but that is very different from actually having a mindset that is about respect for people with autism, about their rights. And so basically, when working with us, I would say the most important thing would be firstly understanding our philosophy and the way we look at disability as well as autism, and then working alongside and spreading awareness. Or people who live in Delhi, they often volunteer. We have a lot of people who volunteer with us in different programs, do things to create awareness and acceptance of people with autism. So any of these things would be things that one could participate in.
Oh, it's great to hear, ma'am. I'd love to be a part of your volunteering team someday.
Yeah, so one of the things that people do when they get in touch is we have people fill in a volunteer form. So we have a good indication of how the person wants to participate, like someone to give time, someone to give their skills, someone to, do other things remotely. So, we have people fill in a form, and then we try and find a match with their skills.
Great, ma'am. Ma'am, so moving on to the next question. So for I think I think personally feel that for autistic children, parents play an important role in their lives. So can you please share with us how a parent could identify autism in their children and how quick they should be in taking necessary steps in helping
Uh,
them?
Parents, I think the first thing they notice is that the child is not speaking. That's one of the commonest things that parents notice. But there are a lot of other things that would be indicative of a possible diagnosis of autism. One would be very often, not in all, but in a lot of the kids, in most of the kids, there would be, there would not be a social smile. And again, not all kids with autism, but a large number of them. Babies, infants, they start having a social smile. But around 3 months or so, they really begun to respond to the parents' faces or faces of other known people and smiling at them, what you call a social smile. So that you will often find not there. And then the other thing to notice would be whether the child focuses more. See, when the child is lying in the crib and you look over, and the child is supposing looking at the fan. Usually they love looking at the fan. All children do, all, not just autistic kids. Things that are spinning. You sometimes have spinning toys that you put over their crib. Does the child shift their vision from that to the face, to the human face? Does the human face get the child more interested than these other inanimate things that are there? So that's the other thing. Then another thing would be, all kids would point to show things they want, but um, even autistic kids would point to show things they want. But many of them would not point to share an interest. So something that kids start doing around 15 months or 18 months, if they see something that fascinates them, like supposing you're on the balcony and then suddenly different things happen in different places. But in the east you have the Rath Yatra in June, so you have this big Rath of Lord Jagannath that goes on many of the streets in Bengal and Orissa and stuff like that. So when little babies, when they see it the first time, it's such a unique sight, they'll point at it. Or even, like at earlier times, there'd be an elephant walking down the road, city streets. So the first time the kid sees something like that, they instantly point at it, and then they look at the adult that is with them. So this pointing to draw attention at something that interests me, right? That is something most kids with autism would not do. They would point at something they want. Like, I want that. That pointing they may do. Some may not also do that. But a lot of them may point at things they want, but not point at something that they wish to draw attention to. So these would be some of the things that parents could watch out for. But until somebody said these things to parents, how would a parent know? They really, unless if they've had another child who's neurotypical, so they can see that this child is developing differently. Otherwise, it's tough for parents. And like I said, the one thing that they notice, tend to notice, is that the child is not speaking.
Okay, ma'am. So once a parent identifies that their child is autistic, so what steps could they take to support their child? So, like, is there any thing they could do to help them?
Well, there are a lot of things they could do. One they could do is that try and interact, be very interactive with the child. A lot of autistic kids, because they tend to be a little bit, they don't, how should I say, they don't connect socially as much as a lot of, not all again, I have to say, but most of them. So parents tend to leave them alone and, carry on with their work. because they don't realize that this is not because the child is shy or something, but there is something more here. So the thing to do would be to interact with the child in a really positive way, a lot of high energy, have fun with the child, do interactive activities with them, identify things in the environment, talk about things in the environment. When spending time with the child in, bathing them or feeding them, label the things that you are doing, label the clothes that the child is wearing or the body parts, and just, have fun with the child. I mean, that's something parents can start doing on their own. And also keep their communication very clear, very, very concrete, not use very complex language, right? So, all the things that parents usually do it with the kid with autism as well. Do not let the fact that this child is not responding as much deter you. That is something that often makes parents think that, step back and not interact as much. But just do those things.
Very well said, ma'am. Ma'am, so one last question. Uh, it is really important for us people to understand the limitations of autistic people and support them in adverse situations. So, how good do you think is the awareness about autism in among the people today?
Yeah. See, first of all, I'd say we wouldn't say limitations of autistic people. They're different, right? It's like supposing we had colleagues who, when they join us, and I live in Delhi now, when they join us, they speak in Hindi, right? Many of them are not able to speak in English. Is that a limitation? I don't think so. It's just a different way that they have been educated. And if we help them, they can also pick up English. Not knowing English is not a limitation. It becomes a limitation because it is in my head that, oh, so and so can't speak English, so then that person is not good enough. So the same thing applies to people with autism. They have a different way of understanding the world, they have a different way of processing communication. So it is not a limitation, it's a different way of understanding the world. So if we get that into our head first, that itself helps us to support them. And I just want to step back. Your earlier question was about parents, and I want to just quickly say one more thing, that sometimes if a parent does not interact as much with the child, they often tend to get blamed, and that is not right at all. Because when you have a kid with autism and the child is not interacting as much, you tend to think that, okay, I don't need to interact as much as well. And parents, the last thing they need is to be blamed for the child's autism. I just wanted to quickly make this point, right? Okay, to get back to this, so what can we do? We can try and understand autism. If we know a place where they work with kids with autism, go and spend time, read up, begin to understand what it is like. Maybe attend a few workshops so you begin to understand, how people with autism view the world, right? So the way to support them is basically understand them and try and communicate with them in more concrete ways so they understand what you're saying. To support them, we basically have to make the world a more accepting one. And that is true not only of autism, that is true of any kind of diversity, which would be any kind of disability, which would be any kind of, people who are different in any way from us are the ones who get marginalized. So it could be somebody with a disability, it could be somebody from a different caste, it could be somebody from a different religion, it could be somebody from a different community or different part of the country, right? So, we just have to make the world an inclusive place for people of every kind of difference. And if we are willing to do that, it would be easy to make it an inclusive place for people with autism as well.
Yes, ma'am. So we need to develop that broad-mindedness and accept them as a different person, and we need to accept their perspective of the world.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your views on autism, ma'am. There is a famous saying, behavior is a communication. Change the environment and behaviors will change. So giving autistic children a suitable environment is necessary to make them shine. We are really blessed to have an organization like NCA working on it. All the best for your future endowment, ma'am. With this, we reach the end of the interview.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking time and sharing such insightful thoughts with us. It was such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so
Thank
much, ma'am. Thank you once again.